2010 tarihine denk getirilen
Vanmiddag op het Schouwburgplein het getal 350 uitgebeeld.
По закінченні прихожани церкви, активісти
188 ülkede 7000'den fazla noktada buluştular.
One planet, one voice.
We're getting to work, so should you. That's the message from 350.org. The organization's founded by our next guest, Bill McKibben. Its book, The End of Nature, sounded an early call about global warming back in 1989. Since then, he's kept at it, writing, teaching, but also building a bottom-up movement. Bill's the winner of the 2010 Puffin Award for Creative Citizenship from the Nation Institute and recently released his latest book, Earth, Making a Life on a Tough New Planet. Bill, welcome to the program. Glad to have you.
Good to be with you, Laura.
So, we're getting to work, so should you. Let's start with the we are getting to work part. What's happening?
Well, this was this huge work party that we put on in October, trying, as usual at 350.org, to sort of spread the word about climate change. And this time, a year ago, we had a big political rally, 5,200 events, demonstrations in 181 countries. This year, we wanted to sort of push it a little farther. We asked people to do a little more. Said, in your communities, do something. Put up a solar panel, dig a community garden, lay out a bike path, something that would help. Not because we think we can solve global warming one bike path at a time. We need political action. But so that at the end of the day, people could put down their shovels, put down their hammers, pick up their cell phone, call what they had, President, Prime Minister, Politburo, say, look, we're getting to work, what about you? And as it turned out, it was a pretty spectacular day. There were 7,400 of these work parties in 188 countries. Pretty much everywhere but North Korea was involved. CNN said it was the most widespread day of political activity in the planet's history. And the pictures, as you can see, were just beautiful. Creativity come to the fore.
So wait a minute, you've got activism, you've got advocacy, you've got people actually doing things. We hear from Congress it's hard to do more than one thing at a time.
What's interesting particularly about all this, in a sense, is that everybody around the world, and most of our biggest numbers, of course, are in poor places, among young people, black, brown, and Asian people, because that's what most of the world is made up of. Everywhere around the world, even in the most remote communities, people rallying around a wonky scientific data point, 350 parts per million CO2, what the scientists tell us the most we can safely have in the atmosphere. I'd spent a long time having people say to me over the years, oh, this is an impossible thing to work on because it's too complicated and complex, no one will get it. As far as I can tell, the main people who don't get it work for Congress and work for oil companies.
Even those in Congress who do get it say, yeah, but it's too hard. It's particularly too hard right now. Look at these two clips from Barack Obama. They're not going to cheer you up, but it'll give people a sense of the picture. Take a look. From 08, cheery, and then 09, not so very much.
My presidency will mark a new chapter in America's leadership on climate change that will strengthen our security and create millions of new jobs in the process. That will start with a federal cap and trade system. We'll establish strong annual targets that set us on a course to reduce emissions to their 1990 levels by 2020 and reduce them an additional 80% by 2050.
The question then before us is no longer the nature of the challenge. The question is our capacity to meet it. For while the reality of climate change is not in doubt, I have to be honest, as the world watches us today, I think our ability to take collective action is in doubt right now.
What do you take from that?
Well, look, Barack Obama, unfortunately, has been a great disappointment on climate change. Barack Obama said with his election, the seas would begin to recede and the temperature would begin to drop. That was unlikely to happen, no fault of his own. But at the very least, we needed some serious leadership and action from the U.S. We've gotten none. We pretty much destroyed the Copenhagen conference last year by demanding that they weaken the agreement so that the Congress would pass some legislation. Then the Obama administration didn't do anything to get that legislation through Congress, where it died. Now we're back at the talks in Cancun, insisting that we weaken the agreement, whatever agreement there is, we weaken it some more, and if we don't, we won't give any climate aid to poor countries. If I was a poor country looking for climate aid, I'd make sure I got a receipt, because I don't think Congress is going to be coming through with that money either. In certain ways, the world would be better off on this whole deal if we just said, okay, we're going to set aside the U.S. and try to do this in functional political countries for a while.
Our reporter from Cancun, you just missed her, but she talked about you and talked about your writings having to do with water, and not just storms, but torrential downfall, what danger this poses, and what kind of crises people are living right now. Can you lay it out for us?
Sure. Look, the summer of 2010 was the most brutal season for which we have records in human history. We got a good taste of what global warming at its very early stages feels like. 19 nations set new all-time temperature records. We were on the phone one day with our 350.org crew in Pakistan. They happened to mention that it was warm. Really? How is it? We set the new all-time Asia temperature record today, 129 degrees. It's like, yeah, that's pretty warm. That manifested itself not just in the melt in the Arctic, not just in that horrific drought across Russia that caused the Kremlin to cease all grain exports to the rest of the world and sent the price of corn and wheat skyrocketing. Maybe the worst manifestation was what happened in Pakistan. Since warm air holds more water vapor than cold, the atmosphere is about 4.5% wetter than it was 40 years ago. That loads the dice for downpour and deluge. And so we see things like that 12 feet of rain that fell in a week in the Khyber Pass that eventually, as it filtered down the Indus River, put about a fifth of that country underwater. There's just almost not words for unnatural, human-caused disaster on that scale.
Where are we vis-a-vis where you thought we might be when you wrote The End of Nature in '89?
The last 20 years have been a story of consistent underestimation of just how quickly and how dramatically this problem was going to manifest. So far, human beings have raised the temperature of the planet about a degree. And 20 years ago, we would have said, that's probably not enough. It's only 2 watts per square meter of the Earth's surface extra solar energy. That's probably not enough to cause huge damage. It turns out the planet's physical systems were way more finely balanced than we'd realized. And 1 degree has, everything out of kilter. The real trouble, though, Laura, is that we're just at the beginning of this. The Royal Society in the UK published a series of papers last Monday saying that on the current path for emissions and climate sensitivity, it looks like we'll see a 7-degree increase in temperature by the 2070s, maybe the 2060s. So if 1 degree melts the Arctic, we sure as hell do not want to find out what 7 degrees looks like as it comes at us.
We may be at the beginning of the climate crisis, but we seem to be continually moving backwards on the political front. And maybe I'm wrong, but the Center for American Progress just released data on the new Congress. 4 new members of Congress are flat-out climate change deniers, and they're not alone.
Oh, look, every Republican candidate for Senate this fall, with the possible exception of the guy in Vermont, refused to endorse the basics of climate science, which is funny since every climatologist in the world is well aware that humans are heating the planet.
But what does that say then about the campaigns?
What
Maybe
it says,
not 350, but
what it says is, well,
everybody.
what it says is the oil companies and the fossil fuel industry are enormously powerful. This is the most profitable enterprise humans have ever conducted. And what it means is we need a real movement now to beat it, to have any chance of beating it. Environmentalists have tried to kind of work a little bit behind the scenes, I think. That was sort of trying to get this cap and trade legislation kind of through the back door and make a lot of compromises and a lot of friends with industry, and it didn't work, all right? A couple of years ago, I began to sense that this wasn't going to work, which is why with friends we started forming this 350 thing. Now, we're not good at this. I'm a writer. I'm not an activist by training, you know, and we have no money and no organization or anything, but I think we've shown at least a reasonable proof of concept that you can get people organized and ready to fight and ready to go. We just need to do it in a much bigger way.
Well, let's talk about where the leverage points are, and I should correct myself, it's not 4, it's 4 dozen new members of Congress. Talk about where the points of possibility are. Is it at the state level? Is it at the city level?
Sure.
Where can this change be happening?
There are good things that can happen at the state and city level, and to some degree they are happening. In certain places people are doing good work, and some of it's bipartisan. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger has been as forthright and good on this as any leader in the country. The problem is that it's very difficult to really address this problem short of national and international action. Because the problem is the price of energy. The reason that we have this runaway climate change is simple. Fossil fuel industry is allowed to treat the atmosphere as an open sewer into which to get to dump their waste for free, all right? And their waste is carbon dioxide. And because they get to dump it there for free, they're insanely profitable, and they're taking some small percentage of that profit and using it to corrupt the political system to allow it to keep this privilege to continue. So until we can change the price of energy, it's very difficult to really make change on the scale that we need in the time that physics and chemistry allows us.
Is that what we're seeing in Copenhagen and then Cancun? I mean, you were just in Cancun.
Yes.
There's no end of indigenous people, local people, grassroots people, less powerful states clearly out there making some interesting arguments about nature's rights and all of the rest.
The problem's not arguments. The problem's not arguments. The problem's power. Look, we thought for, I think, 20 years that if we explained to politicians that the world was coming to an end, they would act. That turns out to have been a miscalculation. We're going to have to figure out how to explain to them that their political careers are coming to an end unless they act.
But you would think saying your planet is coming to an end would be equally effective.
You would think, but it turns out, I mean, empirically not to be true, because we've been saying it for a long time. And there seem to be the powers that be willing to sacrifice the future for the very, 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 very short term.
So how do we do it? I mean, criticism, self-criticism. What needs to change on the environmental front? There have been a lot of complaints that the big environmental groups are too in the process, are too embedded in the way things are always done to make the changes that need to happen to change the political power picture.
This cannot be a function of the environmental groups. Our environmental groups, which are wonderful and noble enterprises, are scaled and sized to deal with threats to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, to listing the gray wolf as an endangered species, to doing all kinds of noble and good and not very core things. You cannot expect that movement as it currently exists to take on the core of the economy. That's why at 350, we find our biggest allies in people who are working on human rights, on public health, on hunger and food security, on women's rights, on peace, on all the things that are completely called into question when the planet destabilizes, on all the things that nobody's able to work on in Pakistan this fall because they're just trying to deal with getting the bridges back up somehow. We need a real movement.
Here's a clip from a documentary, The Economics of Happiness. We played a little clip of it earlier this week, last week actually, on Grit TV. It addresses one of the more, I think, interesting aspects of your campaign and others, the connection between the changes we need to make and actually happiness. Take a look.
We often hear about efficiencies of scale, but actually the truth is what we've developed today is a system that could not be more wasteful. We have tuna fish caught on the east coast of America, flown to Japan, processed, flown back to America and sold to consumers. We have English apples flown to South Africa to be waxed, flown back again to be sold to consumers. The whole process involves incredible quantities of waste. If you shorten the distance between producers and consumers, you're cutting out your food miles, you're cutting out your emissions, your oil dependency.
If we're going to buy food in San Francisco, let's buy it regionally.
We've got to begin localizing our politics, localizing our economies, localizing our spirits, even our spiritual natures.
They're smiling at the end there, Bill, and that to me is a very important part of this type of approach. At a time when Americans are feeling beleaguered on every front, it could be that an environmental message saying consume less, drive less, do stuff less is part of the problem. And instead I'm hearing something that's about, actually, you could be getting a whole lot more.
Most of my intellectual as opposed to activist work in recent years has been about these questions of localized economies and things. And there are good environmental reasons to do them and so on and so forth. And some of them were on that clip. But the real reasons have to do with rebuilding connection and community. The most interesting thing about a farmer's market, since they were talking about localized food, is not that it's better ecologically. Clearly the 5-mile tomato beats the 5,000-mile tomato. The most important thing is that they're a different human experience. Sociologists followed shoppers, first around the supermarket, then around the farmer's market. And everybody's been to the supermarket, you know how it works. You just walk in, fall into that light fluorescent trance, visit the stations of the cross around the supermarket. That's it. When they went to the farmer's market, on average, people were having 10 times more conversations per visit. Okay? Statistically, Americans are less happy with their lives than they were 50 years ago because they have much less connection. The average American has half as many close friends. That's what happens when you devote your economic life to building bigger houses farther apart from each other, which has been our task. In environmental and in human terms, we can go in a new way. It's one of the reasons we set up 350.org to be this sort of new, strange activist hybrid where we have thousands of things happening in thousands of local areas, and then we bring them together to make them more than the sum of their parts.
We've only got 30 seconds left, but are you happier?
I'm right now really pleased with this growing global movement. We just finished these 2 weeks of giant-scale art projects all over the planet. The first art big enough to be seen from outer space, and people can see these images at 350.org. Look, I think we got a shot. I don't know if we're going to win. I know we're going to fight.
Well, thanks, Bill. You can get more information about Bill McKibben's work and links to his books at our website, grittv.org.